It is an honor to have hosted Donald Blanton and David C. Jackson here at Windsor Art Center. My name is Mariana Martino. I'm the current curatorial chair here at Windsor Art Center, and it has been a great experience with these two artists. It's been lovely. We'd also like to thank Tungus College for bringing trees that are in the back. Thank you so much for doing that. And we're just going to jump right in. So if you both would introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about you and your journey as an artist. I'm going to be passing this microphone to you as you guys go.
David, I'm going to let you go first.
Oh, okay. Sounds good. Age before beauty, right? Is that what they say? You know, my journey as an artist has been super organic, right? I had the privilege, my mom's in the audience right now. I used to bug her all the time about how to draw Wolverine and Spider-Man and so forth. And she could take me but so far. And, you know, she had the keen instinct to say, hey, I think that you should study some more, study under somebody else. And so I started with a watercolor professional. Her name was Ann Harhay, and I worked with her for about a year or so. And then when my dad he was hosting a show at Mass Mutual, he happened to invite an artist by the name of Donald Blanton. And so during the setup of the show, there was a particular word. My dad's very critical, right? So he said, I think that this word here is spelt a little bit differently, right? And so that was the bond that they were able to strike. And so that was the entry for my dad to take a shot and ask and say, hey, you know, I've got a son who is super interested in art, and I'm wondering if you would be able to help him. And so he says, well, yeah, you know, maybe, you know, give me your contact information. And so sure enough, he took that shot, and he put me to the test at first, right, by saying, you know, let me see if you could follow along with this. And so, you know, surprisingly to him, I was able to follow along, and I was able to retain a lot of the information that he was giving me. And he took a look at my work, and yeah, it was on from there. So started about 9-10 years old, and so my first piece around then, been doing it ever since. So that's how we first started. Yeah, how I first started.
Do you remember that first piece?
Yes.
Well, what David said is true. The only thing he left out was, I almost said no, because I had so many things I was doing. And I did put him to the test, and what I said to him, quite simply, I said, if you look up at your father, you'll notice the eyes. There's perfect space for one more eye. Inside of the eyeball, you go to the corner of the mouth, inside of your eye, outside of your nostril, and I went through all that. And I purposely said to him real fast, okay, repeat what I said. And he was able to. And from there, I realized how serious that David was. And it's been a journey for both of us, an enjoyable journey, but I can say one thing to everybody here, this is a fact. You are going to witness history. Follow everything and you'll find out. You are going to witness today and in the future great work coming out of this young man right here, I promise you. This piece here, only because Juneteenth is coming up soon, for the gallery, this gallery and this art center does so much for society and for everyone, the artists and all. I'm hoping someone would like to purchase this before they leave, or at least ask about it, and the money going to the art center.
Thank you.
Okay, and you're quite welcome. Thank you.
So I'd like you guys to explain a little bit more about your relationship with mentor and mentee. You already talked about how it started a little bit, but how did it develop over time as you guys obviously grew as artists and as people?
David, and I will let you go first because...
Yeah, because you know I can be long-winded, I'll miss some things, so you can, yeah, thank you. It's all right. You can kick me with those nice loafers, I like those, so I'll be honored if you kick me with those. So, you know, our our relationship, I'll share. So, you know, you all might know him as Don Blanton, but I slip up and I call him Uncle Ray, right? And it's because it's his middle name. And my Aunt Judy jokingly would call him that and say, Raymond, and quite frankly, he hates it. So over the years, I said, you know what, I'm gonna take some jazz. Let me see how far I can stretch our relationship. Say Uncle Ray. And he didn't bat an eye. So I've been calling him that ever since. Now, what's interesting is, we had to be working together. I was studying underneath you for about 2-3 years or so until he asked me this question one day, and he goes, by any chance, do you have an aunt by the name of Andrea? I said, yeah. Does she have a sister by the name of Jackie? I said, yes. I said, well, I'm pretty certain that my brother was married to your aunt. I said, really? I said, no, that's impossible. I said, yeah, she's out in Michigan, right? I said, yeah. I said, how do you know this? And so, lo and behold, we're like distant relatives through marriage, right? So it took so long for us to actually realize that. So, but it's just the magic, right? And the ability to find that out later on down the line was just incredible. So it made our bond that much tighter. But, when it comes to how we approach our relationship now, after years of studying, like my son's about 9 years old, that's when I was first able to be acquainted with Mr. Blanton. I took a hiatus over some time in playing football, playing sports, and then I said, I was kind of a reluctant artist in a way. I said, I want to do a little bit more, all right? And didn't know what that was. And so he always had faith. He's like, well, whatever you say, I know it's in your heart and I know it's in your spirit. You're going to come back. You're going to come back, and always do. So now, art to me is like breathing. It's the fuel. It's probably what keeps my household sane and keeps my wife,
insane.
Yeah. So he's the epitome of not only an artist, but a man for me, right? Really look up to him and everything that he stands for. When you talk about integrity, somebody who leads by example, someone who's very business savvy, right? And can really spread love and spread a message, and a very distinct message. And there's no mistake that the studio is called Distinctive Art Studio, right? Is what sets us apart from one another. We have this relationship where we're close and we all share, we're all humans, right? But he's able to break down the different elements that make you who you are and champions that. And so I have it instilled in me through him to do the same thing whenever I encounter other people. So that's pretty much how we operate, and I make sure that it's reciprocal so that, I couldn't do this show without him, right? And so I think it's only proper to seize the time while we can.
Well, how do I follow that? Except to say that I'm very proud of David. And I do have literally thousands of students that for the past 25 years or so, or even more, that have been through the studio, but very few have reached the level where I can say, I can learn from. And that's the way it is. Now that we learn from each other. And I'm not ashamed to say it, I'm proud to say it, because that's the way it should be. When we teach, we want the student to be able to surpass our level. To me, that's what it's all about. And I won't take much longer on this except to say that we have a lot of ground to cover and we're going to keep going. And like I said, I really meant what I said. You are witnessing history, because trust me, we've just scratched the surface. Do you feel the same way?
Oh, I certainly do.
Yeah. We just scratched the surface, so it's going to be much, much more coming.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So, as we know, the title of this exhibition is Primeval Awakening, Moving the Chains, and each of them are it's divided in half between Primeval Awakening and Moving the Chains. So this question's for Don. Explain your current pieces on display here at Windsor Art Center and explain the connection to the theme of Primeval Awakening.
Primeval Awakening, for each of us, every one of us could go all the way back in our heritage, go all the way back, and it's primeval. But the feelings still say, what's that, fight or flight? It's the same thing about our artwork. If I didn't produce and do exactly what I was put here to do and what I love to do, I may as well just not bother at all. And I honestly cannot say to you where it came from, because I don't know who my great-great-great-grandfather, I don't know who it was, but I know that it's inherited, it's in me. I can't stop. I had surgery a couple of years ago. In fact, 29th of November 2023. And by rights, I shouldn't even be here from what I was told by doctors. But I have to stay because I have so many things artistically, personally, things that I have to do. So I go all the way back to the primary source. Primary awakening is to wake up to what is in you, and you may not know where or why, but it's there. David? Actually, do you?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a similar question, though. So for David, if you can explain your current pieces on display here at Windsor Art Center and explain the connection to the theme Moving the Chains. I will say, if the train gets a little too loud, you can pause, because there's a train that's going to go by.
Cool. Thank you for the heads up, Mari. That's also might be my cue to be as succinct as possible, right? Almost like a decade ago, where it was a small pop-up or so, and it was the title of a talk that we gave. And I said, well, you know, why don't we carry that over? So in discussing that, he goes, well, what about if we tag on the primeval part, right? And so we had the discussion on what that means, what that denotes, and then the connection there, right? And so without forcing it, and then looking at our pieces and then comprehensively what they contain, it made perfect sense. So the moving the chains part of it, I wrestled with saying removing the chains, right? And that was the initial concept. But to be honest, the chains are never really removed if we're honest with ourselves, right? So there's invisible chains that we place on ourselves. There's invisible chains that society or, you know, stigmas may have on us, right? So it's about not necessarily totally abolishing those. Do that for sure, right? Especially to lose any negative stigmas. But it's about also anchoring yourself to other positive aspects, right? And making progress. You know, I alluded to my past in playing a little bit of football. I ain't played too long. You see my stature. I'm about 5'8", soaking wet, and I'm maybe like 175 or so, right? I wasn't hanging in only for, you know, a couple years, but it was always about those incremental gains, right? About, you know, nickel and diming, about, you know, being 1% better, right? And so that's what the work stands for. It also connects, right? So if we look at the Wall Street Trapper, or, you know, the piece that's back there over towards the door, you know, that it's about a retail investor, right? And seizing powers as retail investors, and, you know, not only investing in the market, but investing in ourselves. The connection that we as African Americans, when we first arrived here, right, mainly by force, we were the commodity on Wall Street. Our bodies were insured, right? So to be able to be empowered to flip the script and to invest in yourself and in the market and your family and so forth, that's the connection that you may see when it comes to the auction block, right? So it comes full circle to right across the way where you have President Obama, right? So it runs the gamut on our diaspora, and there's all of these connectivities. And then what it means to wear the mask, right? And I know I'm dipping into, you know, some of Don's work, but that's the connection, right? That's the lineage. But a lot of the times people get it misconstrued that, and we get blinded in a way by we started here. No, we started in the motherland. We started in Africa, right? And that's everybody. That's everybody, right? The cradle of civilization. So that's why you have the boy king, you know, to be able to tap into that greatness. Those that are on the younger side within the crowd, like even my son, right? Even like Brandon, you tap into that spirit of your greatness, right? And I think we all can do that, and we all can seize that, relish it, and then leverage that, right? And believing in yourself. And that's what this show is about. Same thing with Nefertiti, right? So it comes around full circle, and that marriage and that honesty when it comes to us as artists and what we do. And that's what he was able to give me, and that's what I wanted to symbolize. It's like I was able to go on a journey as an artist as far as being curious and what I wanted to create. And I think that Uncle Ray comes from a very, he is very provocative, right? And it taps into the heart, right? I come from a cerebral aspect of just of certain curiosity, but it's the merging, the blending of that you get with Primeval Awakening, moving the chains, right? It's a gumbo of that, and you can almost chronologically see that throughout the works that are displayed here.
What David said is so true. And I do have a book I published. It's back in the back. If anyone's interested, you could get one before you leave. But in that book, David says something. If you look at the piece above my Primeval Awakening, that piece, what David said about the chains and removing them, there's a poem in my book which said, referring to chains as barriers, please remove the barriers which impede my success. Some placed by society, I impose the rest. Once they're removed, there'll be no reason to stumble or fall. I'll stand up, dust myself all off, and conquer them all. And that basically is what David was saying in a different way. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. This poetry is so beautiful. I like one of mine. So this question is for both of you. So both of your work exhibits a thematic continuity that resonates across your entire body of work, both in this exhibit and just across all of your work in general. Could you elaborate on why the themes you explore are significant in your artistic practice? I know you did just explain this a little bit. And why is it such an important message to depict in your work?
David, go ahead, please.
Okay. So yeah, I just tapped into some of that right now, right? But I'll elaborate a little bit more. So I think in my catalog, I probably have about 650 pieces, right? So this is just a fraction. I'm scared to ask him. You know, this guy's sick. So even in creating the show, right? And you know, saying, hey, you know, we have X amount of works. This is what the space is looking like. And goes, okay. And so I go over to his house, I go over to the studio and have a visit. You should have seen what I just created now. Here it goes. I'm like, you just created 3 or 4 more pieces within such a short time span. So he's like a machine, right? So I say that to say that it's a fraction of what we do, right? Don talked about, you know, us continuing, doing more, not only separately, but of course collaboratively, right? So it was tough, like narrowing down the work. And so what you see here are like pieces that date back to 2008 or so, 2007, because I believe that's when President Barack Obama was created. So it was actually created before he stepped into the White House, right? And so, you know, the work, it shows again that lineage, right? So when we talk about the lemonade stand in this series here, it's talking about like the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we have the realistic version of the hands that are to the far left, and one of the pieces that I sold probably when I was about 13 years old. It was called George Washington Carver's Hands, right? So they were just peanuts. And it was just tapping into, what he stood for. And I wanted to elaborate on that more and add lemons in there, right? What happens when you turn a sour situation like oppression, slavery, into something that's as sweet as you can possibly make it within the confines that you're working with, right? So no matter what, how are you going to find the wiggle room in order to develop yourself and in order to find your liberation that comes from within your mind, right? And so that's what that stands for there. But while I was creating it, I wanted to also show the sheer beauty that can come out of it and the what if, right? So, tapping into the centerpiece there and having an abstract or a cubist version of it, right? Showcasing those black inventions. A shout out to my mama who, gave me this poster that was about like miracles of black inventors, right? And so I would always stare at that poster. And in staring at that poster, I would get these ideas, right? Again, that you could be greater, right? Always pushing for more. And so, between the stoplight, the heart pump, even down to our insoles, right? And the creations that we were able to come up with, that's what that one stands for, and the building of America society and going off of, the free labor during those years that gave America the head start that it is. And that's what the last one talks about there on the far right, is like that's the ugly, right? It's like, what happens from a surrealistic lens on what it looked like. So you have the blood that's dripping down from hands being pricked by the cotton. You have the scraps that are being served. And so these in-depth and copious layers that are there, they are reflected in a lot of the other pieces. Some will hit you a little bit more profoundly, right? Like Fred Hampton or Nina Simone there or Marcus Garvey, but then they have like the other more complex pieces that are involved in there. So that's like the span of the work that I tap into here.
We're going to break it down for a minute and have a little fun with us. David has done quite a show. Even when David was younger, he did a show with me at Agawam High. And I had a thing where I did a show prior to that at Holyoke Hospital in Springfield, Holyoke. And I had someone with me who kept saying, I can hardly remember the name of people. I could meet someone now, and 20 minutes later, I can't remember who. So when we went into the hospital, like any nursing home, a lot of the people were almost asleep. And I said to her, we're going to have fun here because we're going to wake everyone up. And she said, how are you going to wake them up? And I said, you'll see, and you're my memory expert. Probably 65, 70 people there. And I really was loud about it. And I said, here's what I'm going to do. I have one name, one first name. It's Don. All of you, I'm going to remember every person here. We're only going to be here an hour and 20 minutes. Probably 40 minutes from now, starting left to right, I'll remember every single one of you, so wake up. And now people are starting to look at me, and I included the nurses and doctors. And sure enough, I started left to right and started when I get to number 10, I go back and say, number 1, what do you think I remember? Name so-and-so, and I name them all until I got all the names, even the doctors and nurses. And people were shocked at how in the world could you remember everyone? So when we went to Agawam High, David was with me, and I said, it's going to be your job. And there were a lot of students. I said, David, it's going to be your job to remember all these kids, every name.
There's 85.
And he says, how many, 85?
85.
He says to me, I can't remember, maybe 2 or 3. I said, no. And I was talking to the audience, and this poor guy was so nervous. He was. And I finally let him off the hook and said, no, you only have to remember 1 or 2. But that's the kind of things I put him through purposely to prepare him, because he used to be a little afraid to talk to an audience. And I says, no, you don't have to be afraid. Most people want you to be successful. And back to your question, The question was about the continuity of the work. And I have to be perfectly honest. The lady had asked me right here about the work, and I said, I love landscapes as well, just landscapes that you'll see when you go to any museum or whatever. But now I'm working on not three-dimensional, but four-dimensional landscapes. And someone would say, what's four-dimensional landscape? It's as if you'll see trees when you first look at the painting, then you'll see trees behind that, and then bushes and a mountain behind that. And it's like you're really standing there on the outside looking at a scene. And I'm working on it, and I promise you, I'll finish a large. I do have one at Mass Mutual. Mass Mutual bought one such as, but I have another one that if we don't have another exhibit here within the next couple of years, I'll have another, or we'll have another to show it. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So this question's for Don specifically, but it is for both of you in general. So Don, explain your art making process. And the reason I had this originally for Don is because Don has both sculptures here and paintings. So how do you choose if a piece is going to be a painting or a sculpture? Do you design them first? Like, do you draw them out first? Do you know that they're going to be a sculpture instantly? And David, you can also answer this about your art making process as well.
I have no certain process. I don't sleep like a normal person. I really mean it. I cannot think of a night that when I go to sleep that I don't visualize some either sculpture or painting. You can say a word, and of that, I can almost picture a whole entire work of art. So there's no, like I mentioned, the four-dimensional pieces. Jewelry, even jewelry. David has a piece of the jewelry, coming up with ways of designing jewelry. I just don't know how to stop, so I cannot say that there's I don't draw it out first, I draw it out here. I may already have a vision and concept of what it's going to be, but then I may tweak it, make it a little better or whatever. David?
Yeah, so before I go into my process, I'm gonna put this young man on the spot. And so one, again, I'll talk about, not only does he not sleep, traditionally, and neither do I, right? We're plagued by different ideas, and that's something that we share and we talk about all the time. But he also doesn't bathe or shower regularly either. So there was this one story that he got himself into some trouble because my man was in the doghouse with his wife because she was knocking on the door in the bathroom, and he so happened to bring a piece of alabaster in the tub with him. And so she goes, Raymond, what are you doing in there? He goes, I'll be out in 1 second. So about 15 minutes later, I'll be out in 1 second. What's that noise that I hear in there? Am I hearing sanding in there? Are you sanding? And so within the process of alabaster, right, and shaving down and getting, what you see the finished products here on display, he was bathing with a piece of alabaster in the tub with him. So that just goes to show you the extent, right? So when we are looking at, pieces about, finding reasons to express yourselves, or looking for those answers, there's no limit, right? So if that's not a way that illustrates that and how his process can be and how the creative process can sometimes consume us, right? That's a sheer example. The other story that I'm gonna pass it back to you, if you don't mind, for you to share will be how you started. Somebody was asking me about if you were self-taught and how you started, right? So there's how you started when you were young, you and Uncle Paul, right? So if you could tap into that a little bit, but then also how you it's a magical story, how you started sculpting, how you even found out about alabaster, please.
It's beyond belief, quite frankly. I was in New Mexico, Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I was there just mini vacation. Group of people wanted to go. There's a place outside Albuquerque called Old Town. And it's a little place where people sell jewelry and this, that, and the other. And it wasn't that great, but it was interesting, something to fill the day. and the group of people were going to the left, and I heard something on the right side sound like a saw, someone sawing, and it didn't quite fit with where we were. So of course I go to the right, and I walk up to a door, and the guy it's almost like a dream. He had a giant rock, and he had a bow saw sawing the rock. And it's like, how the hell do you saw a rock? And I stepped up to the door, looking at him, and he said to me, well, it took you long enough. And my thought was, what do you mean? And then I assumed that someone was coming, and he expected and thought I was the person coming there. And I said, no, I'm just curious about what you're doing. And he showed me a little sample of a piece of alabaster, a little turtle he made. And the truth was, I looked at it, and all I could visualize was what I'll do with that stone. And then the magical part, he said to me, go down the street, go to the right, and his partner named Ken has a table set up showing people how to use it. And as I approached the guy, and no cell phone, so I know the other person didn't call. The guy said to me and to the group of people waiting for the demo, I'm going to need a volunteer. And he looks at me and says, you'll do, come on. And I stepped up, and he explained everything, every tool you need, right down to silicon carbide sandpaper, which is waterproof. It won't come apart like regular sandpaper in water. He explained the whole process, and I told him, hold on a second, and I repeated everything he said. And then the audience started laughing because they thought we were working together, and it was a joke. And he said to me, well, oh, you've done this. And I said, no, sir, but I will. At the end of that, he gave me a small piece of alabaster for helping. I came home with that, and my wife said, now I know you've gone loony. You go all the way to New Mexico and come home with a rock. And I said, no, that's not just a rock. And it's unbelievable as it is. That was a Friday. That following weekend, I told her, I said, I have the stone, but I don't have the tools. I gotta go find the tools. And some of the tools are very expensive. I went about a block and a half. I saw a sign that said tag sale. Pulled up, walked over, saw nothing. A lady came out of her house and says, sir, did you find what you're looking for? And I smiled because I'm thinking to myself, this woman don't know how many tools and what I need. And I said, no, I didn't. And she said to me like, well, speak up. What are you looking for? So then I told her, I said, ma'am, I sculpt in stone and I paint whatever. I said, but I'm going to start sculpting in alabaster. And then I sculpt in wood. She said, oh yeah? I said, I don't have the tools. She says, come with me. So I says, what? She says, I said, in your house? She says, yes. First thing I said, is your husband home? No, I'm really, I said, and she said, I don't have a husband. But she stepped over, and I could tell she was kind of serious, and I was a couple steps behind her, but I followed her. And then when we get in the house, she says, well, we have to go up in the attic. Now I'm really kind of curious. You really want me to go up in the attic? And we finally went up in the attic. She goes over to move things around, comes out with a belt like a carpenter or anyone else would have. Every tool that I needed, the pointer, the claws, I mean, every single tool. Then she gave me the 2.5-pound mallet. She had silicon carbide sandpaper I needed, everything. I reached in my pocket and I said, ma'am, don't get rid of anything. I was only maybe 3 blocks from my house. I said, I gotta go home and get more money. She says, for what? And I says, ma'am, I know what these tools cost. I know what they're worth. I have to have more money. She says to me, why would you pay for something that's yours? And I honestly had to pinch myself because I couldn't believe this. She says, no, they belong to you. You're not gonna pay for something that's yours. And I said, no, ma'am, I kind of like to pay for what I get. She says, you will. And an article in the Sunday paper months ago, a full-page, front-page Sunday article. At the end of that article, I said to the reporters, I have to tell you what happened, and I hope that lady finds this article so I can properly thank her. Because I said thank you for the tools, but I never had a chance to let her know how much they meant. And she did say at the end, I know you're going to use them. She said her and her friends took a course at Springfield College. Part of it was sculpting in stone, and she said, we can't do that. She says, so they're yours, use them. Thank you. But you're right. How could that be?
Before we move on, do you want to explain your art making process a little bit?
After that? I'm just kidding. I will briefly. I'll try to be brief. Yeah, right. So that's why I had to ask. It's funny because I have a friend, Kimora Harrington, which helped. So I'm an introvert by nature, right? I'm a hermit. So it takes a lot for me to even like step out of the house. But it's magical stories, right? You have these interactions with people, and we as humans are social creatures, right? Like penguins. I love penguins. Anywho, that's a side note. But anywho, out and meeting people and feeding off of one another. Don talked about like certain words or certain music, right? Hence why he asked for the love of music. A lot of my pieces will be moved by music, right? But a lot of them, I have this knack for literature, right? And so there's certain words. There's that saying that a picture's worth 1,000 words. And say, well, yep, and that much more too, right? And so a lot of the times, like pulled from all angles with strings attached. So that 5-foot piece that you see over there, that, believe it or not, it started with an index card. Just had these random thoughts, and I said, you know what? It would be really cool if I have this body that's suspended in the air, and there's these elements that come together to make up the west and the east coast, right? And then I'm thinking, I'm listening to like Tupac's Brenda's Got a Baby and stuff, and at the end, heartbreakingly, the young mother puts the baby, discards of the baby, right? So I said, well, what would happen if the baby was reaching out for that love, right? What was it that Brenda was looking for at that time? She needed love too, so hence why she's looking to reach out to that heart that's there. So I'm writing all of these thoughts down, right? And they're all words. When I approach a canvas, I get quite lazy and also excited, right? So, instead of drawing the contours and mapping things out, I say, I can't wait for this. So I don't necessarily have, like a lot of artists will have undertone paintings and stuff, especially when they're doing portraits and whatnot, and any piece in general. I literally will draw like almost like a Venn diagram, and I'll go on with the circle, and I'll say world, hat, arm, shoulder, I draw a block, and then I'll like map things out, and I'll just put in the words. And so I visually map things out with words, and then I go in layer by layer. So the reason why you'll see certain textures used is because it's from reworking the canvas. Me going back in, so I'll have an initial idea, but then it builds. And then, in studying under Uncle Ray, I will look at, certain things feed into one another. So a contour may bleed into another one. And I say, ooh, this would be kind of dope if I place this here, right? Let me add these features in here, and so they'll meld into each other. So where you'll see certain iconographies, as I call them, or portraits that are just like one protagonist, you'll see others that'll have 3, like Styles P here, or like Wall Street Trapper that's over there in the corner, because I want to be able to convey different angles, different personalities, because we're more than one dimension as human beings, and so they leak into each other, and then I have to expand upon that. So a lot of the times I'll have notes in my phone, I'll write them down, and then I have to strip them away and prioritize them on what's important and then what makes sense as I'm like building the composition. So yeah.
And we have to save some questions for them.
So this question is mainly for David, but you can answer this too, John. So David is an art professor at Tunxis, What is the biggest lesson you've learned from both being an artist and an art professor, and how does being an art educator influence your artwork and vice versa? And Don, you can answer this too, because you have definitely taught many people.
That's an easy question, because no matter how old the age of the student, we can all learn from them. This young man sitting right here has to be all of what, less than 10 years old? I could learn from him, and I may blow up the thought, but I could paint a whole painting off of a sentence you may give me. To me, that's easy. It really is.
Yep, I'll echo those same sentiments, right? I'm a huge proponent of lifelong learning, right? And, learn from the best, right? My parents are the same way. Always curious, right? I think curiosity and courage, there's a lot that's there. Being willing to put your best foot forward, take risks and take chances. That's what I learned from the students that I serve, right? My department chair from CT State Tunxus, Jackie Decker's in the crowd as well. She's a proponent of that as well. Professor Peter Denegre is out there as well. We believe in, and I love to surround myself around people that are curious and are always like looking for different perspectives, understanding, and then that spark kind of feeds back into you. And a lot of the times while you're teaching, you're also teaching yourself, right? Just naturally. It's kind of reinstilling certain things, getting back to the basics. It's almost like a basketball coach that's like breaking down certain drills, and you're going back to the fundamentals, right? Oh, I forgot about approaching it. I talked about my process earlier and just laying things out. Me teaching at CT State Tunxus, I have to go back to the basics for drawing one to say, oh, okay, yeah, let me help this be a little bit more manageable and digestible. And then in return, I said, oh, yeah, now I can expand this even more and, quite frankly, simplify certain things. So as complex as some of the work can get, it's even more powerful when you can simplify an idea and convey those thoughts.
Thank you. So this one's for Don, but also you both can answer. So you've mentioned your art being a healing process for you and all that you have gone through in life. How has creating your art been helpful in healing?
Creating art has been wonderful for me as a child, coming from a family of 11 kids who many times I look in the refrigerator and it was empty. But I'll tell you what was not empty is my mom giving us paper and pencil. And you sit there, you can create something. And that's what started it, quite frankly. David. I went on hiatus. I go on small breaks, right? But then I get stir crazy. And then, my wife can probably attest to this. My mama sure can. Other people, my kids probably can. They'll know when I got an attitude. And I'm going through some things. And so over the years, I'm like, that's the common denominator. I haven't painted in a couple of days. Oh, I didn't draw this in a little while. And whether or not it's something that I am, it's a super personal connection, right? I breathe through the works. I go through, if you are familiar with the term of like method acting and stuff, a lot of times I do that while I'm creating. So while I'm studying like a Fred Hampton, or I'm, tapping into like a Nas or so, I'm immersing myself in their spirit, right? Hopefully that doesn't freak you guys out. Yeah. But while I'm doing that, I kind of lose myself, right? And I allow myself to be lost within that, right? And so in doing so, I heal that way, right? But I have to, snap back like a rubber band in order to see who I am, but I'm always drawing on those pieces.
Thank you. So this question is mainly for David, but also I'm going to bring Don into this question as well. So David, you incorporate a lot of interactive elements in your paintings, such as the whiteboard and the painting that's hanging up right now. What gave you the idea to add these interactive features? And I'm going to add you, Don, into this because you also incorporate poetry, which I do feel is also interactive. So what gave you the idea to do that, and what's that process like?
The process came about initially. My daughter, I was creating the first One Last Hug. a sculpture of an adult hugging a child. And the reason my 14-year-old daughter asked a question, what is it? She couldn't understand by looking at it. It was half done, and she wanted to know what it was. And I said, that's an adult hugging a child, like your grandfather, my father. You never met him, but he never once, not one time in our whole life did he hug me. I said, I did fairly well, artistically, academically, you know, and not a word, not a hug. And she kind of, not once. I said, no, dear, not once. It was always, you know, little no good so-and-so, you'll never be worth, and that was about it. So she said, oh, I don't believe that. She said, by the way, what happened? And I said, he had a heart attack when I was quite young, and we lost him. He was outside, my mom had him outside, trying to get air to him, and I heard him say, where's Donald? He didn't ask for my two older brothers. He wanted to know where, probably because I was the toughest on him. And when I went to the side, I was waiting for the ambulance, and I heard him say that, and I looked down at him, and he says to me, I won't be back. And that was it. So I told my daughter that. Then I kept working. She finally said, no, you're not going to write that. And she said, well, say it again. And then I didn't. But as I was working, it was almost like I was talking to myself. And I said, I swear that's what I heard him say. I won't be back. That's what I heard him say. And I said, Dad, one hug is all I ask. Make it a good one now. You know, one that would last. I would savor your touch until eternity. Please, Dad, just one hug for me. And he was gone. And my daughter, she broke down crying, and then she said, you knew what you were going to say. And then so she wrote it down. And we setting up the show in Amherst, and someone walked over to that piece, and we were setting up, not even finished, and a lady wanted to know about it, and she read what my daughter wrote, and she said, how much is this piece? And I told her. She said, put a red sticker on it. Please don't let anyone else have it. So that's what started it. From there, after that, it just came easy. It just comes easy, you know, natural. Go ahead.
Do you want to repeat it?
Yes, please. You see why I got to take him everywhere with me. I get lost in the poem and the story.
So you incorporate a lot of interactive elements in your painting, such as the whiteboard. What gave you that idea? How does that process look like?
Yeah, so quite frankly, right, so again, so you can see the difference, right, in some of that contrast, and he tugs at the heartstrings, like literally, right? I'm more cerebral, so I'll talk about, you know, my approach was just for value purposes and functionality and practicality, right? So I just wanted to do some cool stuff, quite frankly. Like that's, and so, and again, and in knowing the spirit, you know, the one that you're talking about, Mari, when we talk about the Wall Street Trapper and teaching investment and stuff, he talks about, you know, he has these whiteboard moments. So his is, you know, electronic, and, you know, you can write on it with more technologically sound, right? So for that piece, I wanted to take the film and actually incorporate it, and so you can actually like write and keep track of, you know, investments. So I'll, you know, see if NVIDIA is like up or down. I'll write different things. So it was for me so I could keep track of certain things. I got another piece that I showed here at the center that's Magneto, right? And so just tapping into my childhood and saying, it would be kind of cool if I had certain strips and pieces that are magnetic. So in my office at Tunxus, it serves as my natural paperclip holster. So when people are like, hey, do you have a clip? They get freaked out because I'll just roll behind them. I'll grab a clip off by Magneto's leg, and then I'll say, what in the hell? Where in the hell did you grab that from? I said, oh, Magneto just handed it to me. You know, he's my keeper, right? So just thinking outside the box, like I always encourage to, and looking for dynamic ways to engage with art, right? Not making it just some ornament that's fragile that we have on the wall or so, but to be able to draw viewers in order to interact with it. So that's where it came from.
Thank you. So this question's for the both of you. What advice would you give to someone on choosing their own style of work and or a theme?
The majority of young artists and artists that I know that make a big mistake, in my opinion, is find yourself in your work. Find something that sets you apart from other artists. Someone can look at it and say, oh, that's David Jackson's work, or that's Don Blanton's. You can't just copy somebody else. You have to create something that has your name on it, and people know that came from you.
Yeah, you know, and quite frankly, you know, Don talked about us just like scratching the surface, right? That's it. It's very humbling when you could like look at other people and engage with other artists that are just starting. I say we're all kind of artists in our own right? But it comes down to how much you want it, right? How much you want to dedicate yourself and sit with it. There's this book, I think it's by James Clear, and it talks about essentially starting all over again, right? It's you know, about atomic habits, right? And keep on building. And, you know, us as human beings, we look for like nuance, right? We're always looking for something new, something new, something new. So there's a mix between that, but then also you got to couple that with the discipline to stay at it, right? And to go after what's in your thought and not being afraid of expressing yourself. So, you know, that's essentially, I'm still finding my voice every day. There's always new stuff to capture and to bring forth. You see a lot of like portraits and so forth on this wall. But I'm really starting to scratch the surface at what do I naturally feel? Like when I meditate, what is it that brings me here? What is it that God wants me to kind of capture and bring to light? There's nothing new under the sun, right? But how can I shed light on something a little bit new from my perspective and my lens?
Thank you. So this question is from both of you guys. What direction do you see yourselves taking your art in the future?
As far as I'm concerned, bigger and better. More sculpting, more painting. I'm ordering larger pieces of stone. I don't know if any of you know it or not, but of course we all know we lost a couple years with the pandemic. I lost time because of surgery. Over a year, almost 2, and I had time to create jewelry during that time and to write a book. But I feel I lost time as far as sculpting and painting, and I have to make up for that. And I intend to make things not necessarily greater, but for you to look at and to know that we're moving way out here. You know, still be able to appreciate it. It won't be abstract that you won't understand it, but I think it'll be much, much more interesting. David? Remember, save time for questions.
Yeah, I think, you know, I like to move in the direction of like more collaborative work, right? Like between him and I, other artists, students, right, that I work with. So that's where ultimately I see my work going. And then, like I just talked about, you know, diving more into like what I feel like, right? My undergrad major is psychology. So really, and one of my favorite artists besides this gentleman here is Salvador Dali. So what can the psyche, you know, bring forth, and then what can we make that's provocative, that touches the spirit, the mind, and also like stretches our limits. So that's where I plan on going with it.
The only other thing left to say is I haven't spoken to David about it, but I'm working to reach out to more universities. Not just the 5 big universities, Smith College, so on and so forth, but all across this US of A. I'd just like to clear up one thing about me not taking baths.
I didn't say that you didn't. I just said that you brought a friend with you.
I think there was a little misunderstanding. I'm trying to say, oh, I think he's right about one thing. I just couldn't stop. I'd be working on a piece. The progress for sanding, when you get all the scratches, everything out, you go from a a heavier grade of paper to a fine grade. And I couldn't wait to see that finished product. So I'd run my bath water and put that work in the tub. But I'd spend time cleaning the tub after. That's what was taking so long.
Sure.
So we have one more question, and then we're going to leave it up to you guys if you have any questions. We're going to do an open audience question and answer. But if you had to choose one thing that you would hope people take away from this exhibit, what would it be?
I think the love and care, and to know that David and I both really care about what we do and the audience and what you see. And I appreciate so much for the phone calls and everything, and people who participate and help us out by purchasing art, because that's what keeps us going, not just the money, but we have to live as well.
Amen, right? You know, and on top of that, right, is that art is one of those areas that it appreciates, right? So in return, you got to appreciate art, right? And so when it comes to the takeaways that I would personally love for you guys to walk away with is the resiliency that you can see that's on display here, and also that strength that's there. And it doesn't come without us pulling together, you know, levels and different looks of support, right? Support looks different. We talk about monetization, but also those phone calls, those emails, the advocacy, right? Just coming and showing up today is that type of support, and we can't thank you all enough, because it really means a lot to us. So hopefully you spread the word and let us know what it is that we do, and send anyone our way, because we love to talk to them.
Thank you. So we're going to leave it up to you guys if you have any questions. Because we only have one microphone, if you don't mind speaking loudly, that'd be appreciated, just to make it easier for everybody. But is there anyone that has a question for either of the artists, both the artists? Yes. You can either yell it, yeah.
So, you know, getting to hear all of you speak about liberating our minds through the painting and the art you are making. So my question is, what is one thing that we as humans can do to liberate our past, the previous version of our trauma of pain through art?
Can you hear that?
Did you get it?
Yeah. So, and I could clarify. You asked about like what we could do as artists to liberate ourselves from past trauma or pain.
Right. That's human beings.
As human beings in general? Yeah, so I think that, you know, I talk about in my solo exhibit that I have going on right now through October over at the Stowe Center for Literary Activism, right? And that kind of taps into what you're referring to, right? It's about art forces you to pause. If it's supposed to force you to become uncomfortable in a way, right? I think us as Black artists specifically, and in particular, we have this responsibility, as you can see within the room, of like, you know, acknowledging where we come from in that continuum. It's what John Hope Bryan refers to as like, we experienced the civil rights, right? But now I think we're in, and what Dr. Martin Luther King was pushing us towards economically, right? The civil rights, right? And pushing forward when it comes to empowerment. So I think that when you go and you approach a life and you're forced to be unsettled and to wrestle with and grapple with some of those feelings, really dig deep and figure out those inner feelings. So you may not create art, but go experience different art. You know, take yourself out of the comfort zone. It's one of the things that that Don had talked about, was like he always challenged me to say, hey, I know you're going to be uncomfortable doing this. This is why you're going to need to do it, right? And so forcing yourself to be, in certain dispositions where you could, because that's the only way you're going to be able to grow, right?
That's right.
Talked about the amygdala and the fight or flight, right? We are used to seeking comfort, right? We're used to, we want to comfort ourselves. We want to comfort our kids, right? But the more you can step out there and challenge yourself, the more that trauma, you meet it head to head, and it starts to diminish more and more. As long as you really face it, work on it, and talk to somebody, right? So me being a psych major, I'm not opposed to, I'm a huge advocate for seeing a therapist, doing art therapy, talking to yourself, right? Immersing yourself with things that will expand your horizons and help you tip the edge on what's going to make you a better human being.
The majority of men are afraid to talk about their feelings. It's the truth. The men, we teach our children, like my father used to say, real men don't cry. And I got slapped because I said, I guess they don't laugh or anything else. And it's like, it's an emotion. And it's okay to admit, I won't lie, when I was, after my operation, I cried because I was thinking, man, this can't be the end. Because the operation was quite serious and a lot of people didn't think I'd make it. And I said, I cannot leave here because I have too much left to do. And I wasn't ashamed to say it to people. Yes, I cried and I fought hard to make sure I stayed, because here's an example of people and what was important to make sure that we pass on.
Does anyone else have any questions? Yes.
I don't think I'm going to be able to speak loud enough, but
Oh, we hear you.
a couple of questions. How do both of you look at and deal with AI as it affects your art and your journey as artists? That to me is because I have to first compliment both of you on your work. It resonates in many ways within me, but I look especially at you, David, as in concern and conflict with AI. The other thing, knowing Don, I know Don, he's a neighbor. There's issues with local support, local commitment financially, from museums, from cities, from purchasers, from institutions that will not be nearly as supportive of the arts as it was in my generation. I am an artist, and I know I can feel conflict here for you, and wonder how you're going to be dealing with it.
Yeah, cool. Skipped it over. You didn't want to touch the mic on this one.
No, I will.
That's how I'm messing with you. So I love this question, right? Because I get asked it all the time in the teaching atmosphere, right? If I follow visual fine arts or graphic design, will I be obsolete, right? The answer is not, again, if you are passionate about what you do, which sounds cliche, but it's artificial intelligence, so it's mocking our intelligence. So it's designed to, generative AI is designed to be more efficient and to be better. I use it diligently though, because whatever you feed it, it can take and it can utilize out into that space, and then it can build on that algorithm, right? And I watch interviews with like Robert S. Smith, who's like the head of Vista, right? And there's just really cool and dynamic things that, again, going back to the gentleman's question about like trauma, right? I think that a lot of us, society is traumatized by certain things, and we are scared. I mean, we think about like Y2K, right? For those of us that are in the room that can remember, we didn't think that we have any computers and that things were just shut down. How are we going to be able to function? And yeah, it went down a little bit, and we faced a certain, the writing was on the wall, right? But we came out of it, right? And so again, that's what it's about, resiliency. So as an artist, I'm maybe delusionally confident that what I bring to the table from my unique perspective, I can't do that. He actually gave me the confidence and instilled that in me, right? In order to do that, or what it does do, I'll be able to utilize that, leverage that tool so that I could do something. For example, in talking about, setting up and having different ways to like model things or utilize different angles that I may need assistance in conceiving, I may tap into that, write a prompt in to say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. But ultimately, if you understand, and that's part of our responsibility, right, is understanding the value and the breadth of art and what it does, right? Why is it not a commodity, right? Why is it something that's rare? Why is the scarcity, why is it worth something? Why is it different when I see a picture or a sculpture that's in here and I view it on the internet, but then I go and I look at it in person, I can see these different dimensions that stand out to me. Yeah, because it's a human experience, right? So my philosophy and my theory is that we're gonna crave it even more because it's going to be missing from our human interaction. So you'll be able to see what's what and who's who when it comes to original thought processes and what they're portraying and what they're bringing forth into the real world, right? So that's my 2 to 20 cents on it.
I agree with David up to the point of how many of you would like to know more about what you're learning right now? This piece here, The Other Side. What did Martin Luther King say? I've been to the mountaintop. I've seen the other side. I'm not afraid. And he's looked over. And to get a chance to meet the artist, to find out everything that's in there, physically stand next to him and talk to him about it, AI can't do that. And I can tell you there's much more than just what you see on the surface there. Much more. And every single piece in here, I don't think AI can bring it all to you. I'm not standing to let you know about it, okay? Yes.
I play around with AI a lot to generate ideas, and I think it's an excellent tool to visualize. You put in a prompt, and it'll bring back something that I never could have imagined myself. And I think I could work from that, whatever is generated. And if I were to do traditional, that's when I think we can go out to Unsplash and all these different places to get reference images. So why not use that AI generated image as your reference?
Yep.
And then you take it from there.
Yep, that's exactly what I was referring to, yeah. Got it.
We have time for maybe one more question if you guys have any more. Yes.
I noticed in your artwork that I see like it's the Black women in pregnancy. I'm a midwife, so I always see a pregnant woman. But I was wondering if you could say more about that, because for me it's, a lot of times our stories are not told. So I'm just wondering how they show up in your work.
Repeat that, please.
So I see traces of Black women and pregnancy
Yes.
all your artwork. I just want to know if you could say a little bit more about how that shows up in your work, or why it shows up in your work.
Probably because I'm from a family of 11, 5 girls, and a mother who was strong and wonderful. And she would correct, she only went to the 11th grade, but back then that was quite an education. But she had so much common sense, and my level of respect for women, I think because of the sisters and my mom, has always been up here, period. And it does show up a lot.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. Thank you to Tunxus for bringing the treats that they provided today. Thank you so much to the artists David C. Jackson and Donald Blanton. This amazing exhibit is open for another week. It closes next Saturday on the 21st, so obviously feel free to come back and look while it is up. Thank you all so much for being a part of this today.